You are on.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everybody. Good to see you all. I'm hoping that as the days go on, we'll have even a better New Year than we had yesterday. So anyway, I'll call this meeting to order. And Karen, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Counselor Vihel-Coppler,
Here?
Commissioner Hanson,
Present.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Here.
Mr. Helms,
Here.
Counselor Romero-Worth,
I'm here.
and Mr. Engelhoff.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes from staff?
Madam Chair, there are no changes from staff.
Okay. What are the wishes of the board? Commissioner Hanson.
I move to approve the agenda.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Do I hear a second? Oh, JC, was that you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Karen, will you please call for the vote?
Sure. Counselor Romero-Worth,
Yes.
Mr. Helms,
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Counselor Vihel-Coppler.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item is approval of the consent agenda. Are there any changes from staff?
Madam Chair?
First, let me hear, is any
Yeah,
changes
sorry.
from staff? Mr. Carpenter?
Mute, sorry. No, there are no changes from staff, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Counselor Carol Romero-Worth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to pull both items that are on the consent agenda for discussion.
All right. Any other comments? I guess there's nothing else to do with that one.
Yeah,
So,
so it's 8A and 8B because they're related.
right. Are there any other board comments? Okay, do I hear a motion?
I move that we take them both off.
Okay, does anybody second that motion?
I'll second that. I don't,
Well, we're actually
I don't think
on
we have to do a
approving the
motion.
consent agenda.
Yeah, there's nothing left on consent when you take those off, so
That's
I'm
true.
sure there's nothing to approve.
I'm not so sure about that. So I'd feel more comfortable if we had a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended, which is taking those items off.
Okay, that'll work.
I move.
I'm really confused.
Commissioner Hanson, you moved to what?
Whatever you said.
Okay, move to approve the consent agenda as amended. Do I hear a second?
Yes. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Karen, will you please call for the voice vote?
Okay. Counselor Romero-Worth,
I am okay approving the consent agenda with nothing on it and discussing the two items that were on it. So if that's what I'm voting for, yes.
You're approving to amend it by removing the items under consent agenda. Okay,
Mr. Helms,
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton,
I have a similar bit of confusion. I'm not sure what I'm voting for. I've never had to do this in a meeting. If we've removed all the items, it's an empty consent agenda. And so,
Although-
I don't want to make a difficulty. I just
Okay.
am confused.
well, that confusion will be over soon.
No, I wish you, I hope you're correct because I need this confusion. But that sounds like I'm making an objection and I'm not. So I will,
Okay.
I will vote yes, that's fine.
Okay, Karen?
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
and Counselor Vihel-Coppler.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, next item is approval of the minutes from the December 3rd, 2020 Buckman Diversion Board meeting. And I would like to state for the record, and our minutes that the only matter discussed during the executive session of our last board meeting on December 3rd, 2020 was the matter as stated in the motion to go into executive session, and no action was taken.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I would like to make a few corrections, and then I want to move to approve.
okay, go ahead.
So on page 4, I know Karen's on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines from the bottom on page 4. I only want to ask for want is missing the T. And then on page 8, Mr. Carpenter is speaking. Is it from the top? It's the 4th paragraph, 2nd line, and Mr. Carpenter. I have 2 more items to update the board on. They're both are going, because it says bother, and I don't think that that's what Rick said, but if you want to correct me, Rick, I'm more than happy to take your correction.
Sounds like a typo.
I don't know if we can do corrections after the fact. I'd have to look back at the minutes again, what you've just pointed out, Commissioner, and go back through my notes. And if I could do that, I'd hate to make a correction now that I'm not entirely certain of.
Okay, well, the sentence is, I have 2 more items to update on the board on. Their BOTHER is what it says. And I am saying that you said they're both are going to be difficult.
That would be correct.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry to take the time during the meeting, but since I wanted your support or your agreement. So I move to approve the minutes with those corrections.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded by Commissioner Hanson. Moved by Commissioner Hanson, seconded by Mr. Helms. Karen, will you please call for the voice vote?
Sure. Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Mr. Helms,
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Counselor Vihil Coppler,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. Next item are matters from the public. Do we have, Ms. Jamie Ray Diaz, do we have any matters from the public that came forward?
Madam Chair, there was no public comment or matters from the public.
Okay, thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
next item is item 7, presentation informational items. Item A, monthly update on the BDD operations. Randy Segru.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, for the month of December 2020, raw water diversions averaged about 4.5 MGD. Our drinking water deliveries through booster station 4A and 5A averaged about 4.4 million gallons per day. Las Campanas did not divert water in December. Our on-site treated and untreated water storage was about 100,000 gallons per day. BDD provided about 74% of the water supply to the city and county for the month. On page 2, you'll see a regional demand drought summary. Unfortunately, we're still looking at a La Nina situation and likely dry weather through the winter. You see the graph at the bottom of page 1 shows about 140 million gallons for December. I wanted to make a point that if you look at the table on page 3, because this report is produced a few weeks before the meeting, those final numbers for the year for 2020 are not final numbers. And so those final numbers will be available within the next couple of weeks, but I wanted to let city and county know that SJC and native diversion numbers, that's not actually the final number. Close, but not quite. So that's all I have to report for this month. So I'm open for questions.
Does anyone on the board have questions? Commissioner Hamilton?
Not exactly a question. From direct information, I would totally agree on the, continued La Nina prediction. But I was just informed by somebody else who tends to follow and look at this kind of thing, that NOAA, so that they're, those predictions are put out by a couple of agencies, that NOAA recently revised their projection for this area to be closer to average. And so this is just kind of a prurient interest thing for everybody. I have not had the time to research that directly, but I thought if anybody's interested, or if anybody else has looked at that, might look at the new NOAA predictions.
That's an optimistic suggestion, and I certainly
Well,
Mother Nature can surprise us, and I hope for the best.
Yeah.
All in all, just to summarize, BDD, actually with the final numbers, I think we may have produced, with our best efforts, and despite our mechanical and the issues with the river this year, we may have produced more water this year than we have in any previous year.
Former Councilor Ives.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just looking at the chart on page 2, it appears to indicate that we have more water in storage now than we did at the same point in time last year. And presumably that's notwithstanding the very dry conditions we've experienced in the last several months. Is that correct?
I'll defer that to Rick somewhat. We did maximize our native water diversions through late summer and fall, which then would allow our SJC storage to accumulate somewhat. And explain that. Rick, I don't know if you have any other detail on that.
No, I think that's exactly correct. We attempted and were successful in maximizing native water this year. So that left more water in storage from SJC. There could be some nuances there too between Heron, El Vado, and Abiquiu, and how BOR moves water, stores water, and then how it ends up in our storage pool in Abiquiu. But Randy, for the most part, is absolutely correct. That's the result primarily of using native water and saving SJCP water.
And just one final question, because I cannot recall, of our annual San Juan Chama allocation, what percentages did we receive this past year, and what's it looking like on a going forward basis?
Rick, I hadn't gotten I don't recall the final report if we got 100% allocation this year. I think we did.
I don't have the report in front of me. My recollection is if we didn't get 100%, it was right at 100%. Mr. Ives, if you would like for me to get back to you with a specific number, I can, but what I can tell you is if it wasn't 100%, it was very, very close.
Gotcha. No, that's great news. I know at times that was not necessarily what was being predicted, so.
That's correct.
Great.
Right. And the river stayed higher longer than we thought it was going to. If you'll think back many months ago, we were not so confident that was going to be the case, but we were able to maintain diversions, and so it worked out.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was an interesting point, Councilor Ives. And as a sort of a follow-up, is it possible that this slightly higher storage is already reflecting some of the shared pool change in management?
I don't have an answer to that, but I do know that we work closely with Santa Fe County to maximize their native water diversions. Those waters cannot be stored and store our San Juan Chama waters. And so we're working closely with the county for mutual benefit between city.
Sure. Sure. I don't know if Dr. Roach is on. I don't know if he has any thoughts.
Commissioner, I believe that Randy is correct in saying that by maximizing native use during the year, we were able to conserve San Juan Chama storage. The question about the shared pool is those operations are reflected under, and I apologize, I don't remember exactly what it's called. It was reflected in this year's operating plan, and it was called maximization of water resources or something. The shared pool would allow that credit that the county sort of built up to pass through to next year. And that shared pool has not been formally adopted yet.
Okay, and Commissioner Hanson.
So I believe Commissioner Hamilton, you can correct me if have we not approved that at the BDD? I thought we had approved it. So is it the city that hasn't approved it?
I thought that it was on the agenda and then it was removed.
Madam Chair, members of the board, it has not been approved by the city yet. It starts through our committee process next week.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
I have the actual 2020 San Juan Chama allocations if you'd like me to share it, or we can move on.
What's the pleasure of the board?
It's just a number, right? Give it to us.
The number is 81.
Okay, easy
Thank you,
enough.
Kyle.
What's that?
I thought you were talking about like a whole chart or presentation. So thank you. Okay. Oh, there you go.
So it was a total of 78,000 out of 96,200, which is 81%.
Great. Thank you. Anything else from the board? Okay. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you much. Happy New Year.
Same to you. So next item is a report from the facilities manager, Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you. Getting back to the correction in the minutes, when I said it would be a little bit difficult to report out, we had some key positions, those staff members resigned. You're aware of them. I wanted to update the board at this meeting on what we have been able to do about that so far. I think we're making good progress. Not the least of which is the maintenance superintendent that was vacated by Brian Armstrong. We wrapped up interviews for that position on Tuesday of this week, which is a pretty rapid pace to be able to do that. We had good candidates. We have a preferred candidate in mind. I have been processing yesterday and today all of the forms, paperwork, and information, checking references, things like that, so that hopefully by tomorrow I can submit that up the management chain and into HR to keep that moving. And hopefully, if all things work out, we'll be able to make that hire in very short order. So that, I think, is good news. It's certainly good news to BDD staff to have that mission critical position filled as soon as possible. As far as Mackie Romero's old position, we are making progress on it. Right now, it's in the hands of the HR department, but they know that it is a priority as well. And I'm hoping to move that forward at a similar pace once we get the approval to do so. So that's in the works as well. I think lastly, another very important position that has been vacant for a while. In fact, we've not been successful the last 3 times we've advertised for it. Instrumentation control technician. It's hard to fill. It's got a very specific skill set and job description. So we don't even receive applications in the past. It just hasn't happened. I've been working on our end to make some changes. I can't be real specific about it right now because it's still in the works. But the changes that we're advocating for would make that position more marketable, more attractive in the marketplace and responsive to what we feel the marketplace is signaling to us. So those changes are also in the works, and I hope that that will result in more success in the future when we do advertise for this position, which again, I hope will be much sooner rather than later. And that's my update for the board.
Thank you. Mr. Eaglehoff.
Rick, can we expect all billing to cease or until that Mackey's position is filled?
It's a tough one for me to answer definitively, Mr. Eaglehoff. I don't think we're going to have any significant hiccups in our process. We're working with Mackey still to keep essential functions moving while that position is vacant. And Monique is doing a really good job also for adapting to the essential functions of that position. If there were going to be any significant issues associated with that, I would report that to the board. I can't do that at this time because I don't think there's going to be. It's going to be difficult. We're going to have to pull together, but I think that we're going to be able to maintain the essential functions of that position, even with the vacancy that currently exists.
Okay, any other questions? Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you, Rick, very much. I'm happy to hear that you have Monique Mays, is that right? There to at least help you. That makes me feel a little bit better that you're not completely alone and that Mackey is out there also. So I just wanted to say that.
Great. Any other comments? Rick, have you concluded your report?
Madam Chair, that's correct. Thank you.
All right. Thanks to Bernadine Padilla. I'm sure you have been pitching in as well as all the staff. And so, that's
Madam
good.
Chair, Bernadine has been very helpful and continues to do so and rise to the occasion.
Great. Commissioner Hanson.
So on that point, I didn't know where the right point was to recognize Bernadine Padilla, but I want to thank her. She is one of the best distributors of information. I love all your emails. Thank you so much once again in the new year. You really do a great job. I get a lot of information from you that I don't get from anyone else. And so I am grateful for your constant attention to those kind of details. And I'm glad to hear that you're also helping Rick with that position. So thank you. I did not mean to leave you out.
Don't worry, I intended to pick it up. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, seeing no other questions for Rick, we'll move on to item 8, the action items. 8A, request for approval to prepare and file amicus brief in the state of California versus Wheeler et al. On and on. So, is there anyone who, okay, Kyle, are you going to take this?
Yes,
first?
Madam Chair, I'm just going to
All
do a
right.
brief introduction, and then I believe there's at least one other staff that want to address the issue.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So I've shared screen the memo that was in the packet. As you all know, this was a topic of conversation at previous board meetings. We've discussed both the regulatory and policy implications that are raised by the current navigable waters protection rule, otherwise referred to as the dirty water rule. We've advised you on several concurrent pieces of litigation around the country. We've also discussed with you that the New Mexico AG's office is involved in this particular case, and that we've been in discussions with them on potentially filing an amicus where we would explain the significant anticipated impact of the dirty water rule or the Trump WOTUS rule on ephemeral and other streams upstream of the BDD intake. And this memo describes the background that we've also verbally discussed and provides the recommendation of filing an amicus brief in that matter. As you all know, there is also a concurrent contract amendment that was on the agenda that was similarly removed from the consent, so that if the board does choose to direct us to prepare such an amicus filing, we would need additional funds to Nancy Long's contract that I work under for you, the board. And so that matter has also been pulled from the consent agenda, and I stand for any questions or clarifications that you would like.
Okay, Councillor Romero Worth pulled this from consent. So Councillor Romero Worth, would you like to go?
Not yet. I do have some questions, and I think there was somebody else Kyle mentioned who was going to give us some underlying information about this.
Yes,
Okay.
I'd be happy to hand the microphone to Jesse Roach, who wanted to, I believe, address the board on this topic.
Before you do that, Commissioner Hanson has had her hand up for some time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to let you know that I did share a video on the dirty water rule that I did for Vox Media out of New York. They were here a few weeks ago and called me, and I had a moment in between some meetings to be able to go down and sit by the Santa Fe River. It was actually right after the day when it snowed, and it was quite chilly, but and I did send it to all of you. It's a short video, and I think it's really done well, and it really explains the issue of the dirty water rule. And I don't know, Bern, if you were on that list. Did you get it?
But if you could share it with me, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah. So if you will send me an email, I'll send it right back. I'll send it to you. And anybody else who didn't get it, I think I sent it. I might not have sent it to Jesse, but I did send it, I think, to everybody else.
Commissioner, I watched it, and it really put everything in layman's terms. So it was very easy to understand, and it's not very long. So anyway,
and really, thank you. I also felt like I was really happy to sit along the Santa Fe River, and I am also grateful to sit on the Santa Fe River Commission for the city of Santa Fe. So I was really honored to be able to speak on our behalf.
Thank you. Okay, Kyle, were you going to turn it over now? Go ahead.
Yes, I was going to virtually hand the microphone to Mr. Roach, Dr. Roach, excuse me.
Okay.
Thank you, Kyle. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for your time. I apologize that I missed the discussion about this in executive session last month. I wanted to raise a few concerns on behalf of the City of Santa Fe water ratepayers. I am not convinced that BDD spending $30,000 on an amicus brief will alter the outcome of a lawsuit that already includes the legal power of 18 states. I wonder why we don't just send a letter of support that we do support the lawsuit. The lawsuit also challenges the Trump administration's navigable waters protection rule, and I'm wondering what will happen to that rule with the new administration, and wondering why we don't wait until we understand what the fate of this lawsuit is, or that actual rule. before we move forward to try and find $30,000 if we can to try to fight it. And sort of finally, it's my understanding that the way this would be coded is that the city of Santa Fe ratepayer would end up bearing about 75% of the cost. I guess I wonder in this case, if this is something that the board chooses to pursue, would it not make sense to specify that that cost be shared 50-50? So I guess in conclusion, I'm just questioning if this is a wise use of limited BDD funds at this time. And I thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, Councilor Romero Worth, did you have anything to add since you pulled this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious about a number of things. So we weren't sure where the this isn't a budgeted item, so we were going to have to find $30,000. Just curious where we're pulling that money from.
Madam Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, I have not identified exactly what line item that would come from. It's probably more likely that it would come from multiple line items. I haven't even done a whole lot of research into it as of yet because I wanted to see how this item was going to turn out. In the past, if someone has come to me or Mackie or other facility managers going back in history, if the board's will is to go find $30,000, we're able to do it. But the net outcome would be that that $30,000 would not be spent on something else that was already budgeted.
So does that mean it would come from some sort of reserve fund?
It means we would probably partially defund some other line item, whether that's chemicals or materials for maintenance and repair, or defer a cost that we could maybe re-incur at a later date. That's probably more likely. We're usually able to do it. It's just that it's not a budgeted item currently. And so I would have to go back into the budget and see, okay, where can we spare a cut here or there in order to come up with the money?
Okay. That concerns me a little bit. Do we, I don't know who this question is for, Madam Chair, maybe for one of the attorneys. Are there other options? Jesse spoke about, could we send a letter of support instead of filing an amicus brief? And I'm just curious if that's an option at all. I guess I want to say too at the outset that, obviously this rule that has been put forward is unacceptable and needs to be overturned. I think what I'm concerned about is our role in doing that, and whether spending $30,000 in a tight budget situation is, and having the firepower that's already out there, whether it will really tip the balance. And is it really necessary for us to play a role, even though I know we have a unique story, I know it's interesting, I know people would be interested in it, but I'm not sure, and I have expressed this before, I'm a little uncomfortable with us jumping in here because I don't think it's going to change the outcome, which I think is already going in our favor, that it'll probably be overturned one way or the other. So anyway, I understand the importance of this, but I'm curious, is there another option? Could we send a letter of support?
Let me take at least the first swing at it. There are several attorneys on the call that may want to add in other points. We can't send a letter to the judge. That's not appropriate as a non-party to the case, and a letter wouldn't be appropriate if we were a party to the case. This is the one most efficient manner that we've identified where we know we can get something before the judge about our particular circumstances. We could obviously send a letter to the editor. We could send a letter to the AG. We could send a letter to the other AGs that are the other plaintiffs that are involved in the matter, expressing our support for the litigation. So there are letters that could be sent to parties, but short of intervening as a party, which is a much bigger project, this was the step where we knew we would be getting our materials in front of the judge in a manner that would not require us to do additional briefing or respond to discovery if the case were to go in that direction. So it was sort of the simplest, safest way of knowing we could get our story directly in front of the judge, given the nature of the litigation. That's not to say that there aren't all the other sort of more general public relations type ways that we can express our opinion or our hopes. But I think it's fair to say this is really the only way we know we can get our story directly in front of the judge for their consideration as they rule on the case. With respect to both Jesse and you, Counselor, referencing what's expected under the new administration, I think that it is generally anticipated that the incoming administration is going to make changes. How, when, and how quickly that all happens, I think is unknown.
But on that point, we also don't know how quickly the different legal paths will resolve the issue either.
That is true. The current litigation schedule has this mid-February deadline for the filing that we're talking about. And then I believe, and Luke, maybe you can help me, I think there's a summer hearing, if I'm remembering correctly, a June or July hearing on this phase of the proceedings. So of course, judges move those deadlines often when they want to. So that's absolutely correct. We don't know the outcome nor the schedule of this litigation. We do know that the deadline for what we've briefed you on is mid-February. So it's not practical, just as a note, it's not really practical to delay this decision to February because there's not really enough time between the February board meeting and the deadline for the filing. I mean, there's time, but there's not much time. We wouldn't want to rush the drafting of this. So we would like a decision today. Perhaps answering a question that was not asked, but I just want to make that clear.
And I'm not, I think there's no reason not to make a decision today. That's not what I'm arguing. I guess, I don't know, are there any other attorneys who wanted to weigh in on this besides the attorney who's going to benefit from it?
I see Nancy Long, you unmuted. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to chime in on the letter idea and confirm that I don't see a way to be supportive by way of letter unless it is to the parties, but not necessarily to the court, because it just wouldn't be appropriate, nor would it get the right attention, so it probably wouldn't be worthwhile doing.
Okay. I have on the attorney request for opinion, I have Councilor Ives, and then I have Commissioner Hanson and Commissioner Hamilton in the queue. So
yeah, I mean, I do have a couple more questions, Madam Chair, and I don't know if Marcos Martinez wanted to weigh in on this, but I also have a question for him as well.
Well, I think I'll have Councilor Ives go first, and then Marcos Martinez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At our last meeting, I had indicated that I wasn't clear this was a prudent path forward as a fiscal proposition because evidence of the harm, in my mind, was not solidly made. In other words, it existed as a possibility as opposed to a concrete thing where we could say the city has been when the county have been harmed in the following ways, and correcting this rule would result in those harms being remedied. And without that concreteness, it didn't seem to me to be the most prudent expenditure of funding for the board. And I wondered, the only alternative route I could think of, and I agree, a letter, it probably does not make sense, but clearly the Attorney General's office is briefing. There is no reason we couldn't be utilized in the briefing, and I don't know where that briefing stands or whether it would be appropriate at this point in time, but whether we tell the story through an amicus or tell the story through briefing by the Attorney General, who is representing the interests of the people of the state of New Mexico. That might be a possibility. And again, procedurally, I'm not sure where the case stands, so I don't know if that's in fact the case, but without being able to demonstrate significant and concrete harm, again, it just did not seem a prudent expenditure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Marcos Martinez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess, I agree largely with the comments that Jesse has made, and I understand many of the questions that Councilor Romero-Wirth has also made. I'm not sure that an amicus brief will tip the scales in any way. In particular, amicus briefs at the district court stage are not even really contemplated by the federal rules of civil procedure. So whether and to what extent it really gets before the judge and makes a difference is not entirely clear to me. I understand, though, that it is an important topic. I guess just in support of some of the other references that both Kyle and Councilor Romero-Wirth have made, I would say that there's litigation in other circuits. There's litigation in the 10th Circuit, which the city is a part of, falls under. And Colorado has already obtained an injunction against the navigable water rule. That injunction has been appealed by the Army Corps of Engineers. That appeal has been fully briefed and argued. And so I think the opportunities to express skepticism towards the navigable water rules are still out there. That is actually an interesting case. The stage of litigation is such that there's an injunction while the merits hearing will go along, and there'll be another opportunity, in other words, for the city possibly to participate in that case, which is in our own circuit. So I don't think that choosing at this moment in time really loses anything for the BDD board or the city and county in particular. And I'll stand for questions.
Okay.
Okay, and Madam Chair, if I can.
Yes.
And the 10th Circuit, the state of New Mexico, for any non-lawyers who aren't familiar with this, or for maybe you're a non-lawyer and you are familiar with this, but we are part of the 10th Circuit. So, if that injunction holds on appeal, we are part of that 10th Circuit, and I think, Marcos, correct me if I'm wrong, we stand the possibility of having the injunction of the rule apply to us here in New Mexico.
It may depend upon how broadly the court applies the injunction. Colorado is really arguing for itself, and only sought an injunction in the state of Colorado and received that. So the rule is not applying. It's been held in abeyance in Colorado already. The 10th Circuit, though, does serve many other states, and New Mexico is one of them. So, as I said before, they're at the injunctive relief stage of the case. The merits will continue, and there may be other opportunities for the state of New Mexico and/or the board to join.
Okay, and And I guess the other question I would have too is, all right, so it sounds from multiple voices that a letter isn't necessarily going to be an alternative for us, but there may be, as Marcos just suggested, other places where we could join as the litigation in the 10th Circuit moves. But I also wonder whether we couldn't, with the new administration, point some ammunition letters, tell our story to the incoming administration, the new cabinet secretaries, and make our case there for how important it is that this rule not be allowed to go forward. So I just want, I'm concerned that this is not the best use of our money, because I'm not sure it changes the outcome. There's already, 18 states suing. There is a new administration. I think there's a good chance we can get overturned with that. And I had one other thought, but I guess that's where I'll leave it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson, and then Commissioner Hamilton.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, all the attorneys. I also want to say, Jesse, I am a little disappointed that you're late to the table and that you were not at our meeting in December to talk about this. Because as I think this board well knows, I have very strong feelings about this dirty water rule. And I have very strong feelings about the impacts on Lanel, on the Rio Grande and the BDD, and of course on the Santa Fe River that is like impacted over 90%, and where we are losing protection and money to protect our waters in the Santa Fe River and on the Pajarito Plateau. So far from what I hear, Lanel has been playing nice, but that doesn't mean that they will continue to, and they don't really play nice anyhow. That's, like a pejorative term of, them not being really interested in what they do to anybody as long as they get their way. I mean, I do sit on the technical working group with Lanel and NB3, and, we're talking about issues of cleanup and issues of cap and cover, which I am completely opposed to. But, so I am concerned that if we don't tell our story, which is incredibly unique and really has the ability to impact the rest of the country, such as places like Savannah River and the Columbia River and all the other nuclear facilities throughout the United States that are impacted by this rule, that, we're missing an opportunity to protect the citizens and the ratepayers, as you pointed out, of New Mexico and of Santa Fe. And protecting the ratepayers, to me, is one of the more important things, the health and public safety of our constituents. And this rule is basically taking away our protections of our water. And so that is why I think that this is important to file this amicus brief. I recognize that it is possibly a city burden, but I am a resident of the city of Santa Fe and a ratepayer in the city of Santa Fe, even though I am a county commissioner. And so I have both hats on in that regard, and my concern is very deep for our water quality. And we've been impacted in the past. And, the New Mexico Environment Department does not have oversight of radionuclides. They only have oversight of vapors. And so when we're having runoff and there's no oversight and no way to protect us and protect our water that we're intaking from the Rio Grande, there is some real impacts. I do understand the financial cost, and it is, I would have liked to have seen it more in the $20,000 range. I think everybody would have felt a little more comfortable. But at the same time, you know, I guess this is a question for Kyle and Luke, is there any way for somewhat less money, we can attach a story with the AG, with Hector Balderas, and ask him to include our story? And, you know, maybe this is Jay also could weigh in on this, that so that we could get some impact, because I do feel very strongly that our story is very important, and not just to the New Mexicans, but nationwide, of the lack of oversight on nuclear facilities and their impact on water quality. Every single river, every single body of water that is beside a nuclear facility is contaminated. And so you know, we haven't reached a high contamination. We definitely have runoff and things like that, but every other facility throughout the United States. And so therefore, that is why, you know, I feel that it is important that we file this amicus brief. I know Rick feels that he recommended that we file this, and I appreciate him sticking his neck out, so to speak, and recognizing how important this is to the citizens and the ratepayers of Santa Fe and Santa Fe County. So, thank you.
Shall I respond to at least that one question, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Thank you. We certainly hope to get the work contemplated done for less than the budget amount. The budget amount is an estimate. It has some funding in it to use the services of Gloria Geoscience to make sure we get all of our regulatory sort of description very precise. They've been the board's advisor on that regulatory program in some detail, and we have consummate professionals in James Biarzi and Jay Lazarus to help us make sure that that part of the amicus brief is as good as it can be. One of the other reasons we have rounded to the high side in the estimate is because we're not exactly sure how much coordination both with the AG and the other plaintiffs' counsel. We're not quite sure what that work effort is going to take. So it may be that it's very simple. There's one phone call and we don't need the other time that's in the budget. It may be that it's 5 phone calls or 10 phone calls reviewing drafts. And so not being aware of how much work that will require, we have, like I said, amply estimated. So it's quite likely that the work effort will come in below or even significantly below the budget. But we wanted to make sure that if it did take a full effort of some of these unknown steps, that the board will have decided, you know, to make that time available for us to get that done. So I guess, you know, what I can say is if you approve a lower number, we'll work within it. And if you approve this number, we'll work to get it as low. Well, we're going to do the work that's necessary to have the very best filing and hope that it is significantly below the budgeted estimate. And if you give us a lower number, we'll do our best within a lower number. And if you tell us not to do it, we'll be happy not to do it.
Okay, Commissioner Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. There are a few points I wanted to make. Frankly, this is a horrible was a horrible rule. The only thing I actually did, which there's no disagreement about, right? Everybody on the board agrees this is something, and frankly, the only thing that's been said that I kind of disagree with, sorry about this, is Councillor Ives, the lack of demonstrated harm, because should this be fully implemented over time, and everything takes time to trot out, it would take away most of the protections that we depend upstream of where we get water that would impact us directly. And so I was initially really trying to depend on the answer to the question Councilor Romero Worth and actually Dr. Roach probably as well asked early on, which was how much this would tip the scale, because it is a really good point that we have a great story to tell, but we have immediate fiscal responsibilities, and it kind of concerned me to hear that this would be taken right out of a different budget item, and so it's kind of hard to decide how to balance that. Do we need to do the amicus brief or buy chemicals to produce good water? That really, concerns me. The harm is potentially real. The thing about waiting for EPA in the new administration, the new administration is not going to sit with this. I don't believe. The person that they've nominated, now that and especially now that there's a chance that nominations might actually be approved, the person they've nominated to run EPA is really good. But because this rule was fully implemented by EPA under the current administration, changing it's going to take a full EPA rulemaking. And, I think the world of EPA, I think the world of many of the people that work there, they're quite a bureaucracy, and their rulemaking, I mean, my God, this rulemaking took years to go through. And so just from that point of view, I feel like the only hope is that under the new administration, which 2 weeks away, if they can make changes fast enough, they won't rush to enforce the rule and eliminate, for instance, all the NPDES permitting authorities and that sort of thing. Having said that, I have no idea whether that's a possibility, that they will slow walk it. Yes, I believe that EPA will ultimately change it, but I think that the dangers are real. So, and substantial. So I guess it kind of drives me back to doing my best to put Kyle on the hot spot again and say, is there something about tipping the scale here because that makes it worth looking at this despite obviously a COVID-driven tight budget couple of years?
It's very, very hard to know what will sway a judge even after you have gotten the decision. We also don't know what other amici might be filed. And of course, it's very hard to know in this complex regulatory and legal environment how quickly things might change from the unstayed rule in New Mexico, which is the current reality. It's just very hard. It's just very hard to know, and those are issues that folks other than BDD funded or BDD adjacent people are working on very hard. There's a lot of legal work and a lot of advocacy work going into making priorities for the new administration, but how, when, and where they get to it, and how it unfolds and what it means for the interim. What we've, I think, heard from Jay and James and others is that the lab is not taking advantage of the current rule, partly I think because they had lots of work invested in compliance with the old rule, and they figured that this rule was going to be very controversial and could be overturned either by court or by a succeeding administration. So they have been continuing, and I hope Jay or James will interrupt me if I'm mischaracterizing what I've heard, but how long that goes and how things unfold, it's I don't know if any of the other lawyers have crystal ball on that or want to add their perspective to it, but I'm afraid it's from my perspective, very hard question to answer, Commissioner.
I mean, I guess my only, I mean, I appreciate the try. My only follow-up question would be for Rick to confirm that this is something that would directly take needed supplies or needed operational O&M from someplace else?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hamilton, I've stated on the record and off the record many times, as the facility manager, I would never sacrifice necessary funds that would impact the mission critical objectives of the operations of the BDD vis-a-vis water quality. So I would not seek to go there for those funds if I thought it would negatively impact the way we run the facility. There are other funds that I can think of or that may not be so critical that I could pick from here and there, as I said, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, or defer until some later date. We've been able to come up with figures like 30,000 in the past. And so if it was the board's will, I would go back into the budget and find that money. But I would not sacrifice the ability of the BDD to provide good, clean, reliable, safe water to our customers.
I understand that. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Romero Worth, you have your hand up?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess, Rick, I'm sorry that you haven't had an opportunity yet to find where you would take the money from, because I think that would help us. Because while I understand, you won't the extreme of you won't compromise the operations, I'm still curious, where the money would come from when it's not a budgeted line item. I don't know. My understanding is the city, and I'm not exactly sure why, maybe under our agreements, ends up paying 75% of this. The county would be paying 25%. I'm wondering if in this situation, if this is as important as it is to Commissioner Hanson, is there a way to split it 50-50? And could we also, look at maybe reducing the amount of the contract so that, I guess I'm wondering, is there some sort of compromise here? Because again, I want to say this is a bad rule. It has to be changed. I get that. But again, we're in tight fiscal times. We don't know right at this moment where this money is coming from. And it's not clear to me that this is going to change the outcome, given all the people who are already working to overturn this rule. So, I mean, if this was going to be, the tipping point, and this was going to make sure that this rule was overturned, then I'd say spend the money, absolutely. But because we don't know that we're going to spend precious resources in a constricted financial time and not know that it's going to do anything for us to getting the result we want, I just don't know. I said this in executive session. I'm really torn on this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other comments?
Yes, I'd like to make one.
All righty, Mr. Helms.
I'll try to be brief, but as I recall, last meeting, the top topic came up of why doesn't New Mexico have the ability to create its own rules and implement them, even if the federal government goes off into a different direction? And the comment was made that we are simply not in a position to do that administratively or money-wise or even legally. I should think that ultimately what New Mexico needs is its own laws governing the protection of its own waters. And where does that stand? I guess my question is to Kyle.
Thank you, JC. James has helped me with this general topic as it overlaps into NMED. So I'm going to ask James or Jay to weigh in here in a minute. But there are things that the state of New Mexico can do. Those are things that have not happened yet. And I think under the current situation with the state, we don't expect it to be happening anytime soon. Do you want to add to that, Jay, please?
Yeah, Chairwoman, members of the board, thank you. Thanks, Kyle. I've been working on New Mexico trying to obtain primacy for surface water quality regulation for over 20 years. And as I may have said in the previous meeting, the biggest pushback there is politically is from the Association of General Contractors and ACI. Financially, the department isn't even close to being set up to handle a program like this, which would probably at least take $1 million in a time of shortfalls just to get it going, let alone having the recurring revenues from it. And at the Water Quality Control Commission, when this was brought up most recently, the department said, well, they would just have to increase fees. And then those entities that are regulated by EPA right now don't pay a fee. So financially, for the state at the moment, I think financially it's a non-starter. Politically, it all depends, how strong the coalition would be to try and get the ear of the governor to make this a priority and then find the money to do it. But nothing's going to happen in the next couple of years easily.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, JC, for that question. And Madam Chair, JC. I wholeheartedly agree with you. We need to have primacy in this state. I have spoken with the Secretary of the Environment. I have lobbied for primacy. I feel like that is something that we absolutely need in this state, considering that we are only one of 3 states in the entire United States that do not have primacy. We might only be, it might be down to 2. I'm not positive. I haven't kept up on what's happened. I know Massachusetts and I believe New Hampshire is the other one who also do not, I might be wrong on the states, but I feel very strongly about that. And every time I get in front of anybody that will listen to me, I advocate for primacy and for us to have water protection rules. So I agree with you on that. But we are also a poor state, and we have depended on EPA for many, many years to oversee our water quality. And with this rule, it's kind of wiped out all of our protection. And I think Commissioner Hamilton could speak probably more eloquently to the EPA and how it has affected and how it will affect New Mexico.
Okay. Anybody else wish to weigh in? All right. So what I've heard is that—
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry. So is there any way to split the cost of this? Or I didn't really, I mean, it's sort of rhetorical, but.
Commissioner Hamilton.
So I don't think that Commissioner Hamilton and I would have the authority to make that decision. I think that is something that we would have to take back to the Board of County Commissioners and get the money allocated. I don't want to make decisions that I'm not entitled to make. So it's not that I'm not interested in doing that. It's just, I wish that this could have come up in like December or, at some other point, and that we could have brought that forward as a topic, and we could have at least discussed it with the county manager, with our county attorney, and with the board, because I don't feel that Commissioner Hamilton and I have the authority to make that decision. Commissioner Hamilton?
I appreciate that.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. So I wonder if it would be, if it's worth considering, and would it be more reasonable to consider a lower amount? It's just, I guess, one of the points that's been made is that it is hard to know. You either have to grab the opportunity to weigh in to try to tip the balance or not. And so who can predict whether we would? And I think the fights on all the avenues are worth pursuing. And yet, I think it's the valid point about, our immediate, fiduciary responsibility to the bigger picture responsibility. And we're not fighting everybody else's battles. This, I truly believe this will have negative impacts on New Mexico and Santa Fe and on the BDD if it goes through for several years, because it's going to take that long to fix the problem. And there are a lot of things that fall into this category from the current administration. There are things that everybody may want to fix now, but it's going to take years to do it. And so I also recognize that at some point, if we cut the budget down too much, it's not enough budget to do something effective. But is it possible to do something that's reasonable, that gets our story there, maybe not as extensively for 20K instead of 30, so that we can balance between, not putting BDD in a bad position and not losing this chance to weigh in and help push the issue forward.
We would
I don't know
be,
who could answer that.
well, we'll do our level best with whatever direction and budget you give us.
Commissioner Hanson.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Madam Chair, I don't know if this is an appropriate time, but would it be appropriate for me to make a motion?
Well, you can make a motion and we'll see what happens.
Okay, I want to request approval of amendment to the legal services agreement with Long Comer and Associates for additional legal service associated with preparing and filing an amendment brief in the state of California et al. This is Wheeler, case number in the amount of $20,000 plus New Mexico gross receipts tax.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Hanson and seconded by Councilor Carol Romero Worth to approve the amicus brief in the amount of $20,000. Any further discussion? Okay, Karen, will you please call for the voice vote?
Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Mr. Helms,
No.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Chair Vihel Coppler.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All righty, thank you. Next item is 8B, request for approval of amendment to the legal services agreement with Long Comer and Associates for additional legal services associated with
I just passed.
Oh, you did them
Madam
both?
Chair.
Well,
Yeah, the motion wrapped in both of those items.
okay, so then that suffices. All right. That's good. Thank you. Okay, next item is item 9, action items, discussion and action, consideration and possible action on resolution 2021-1, determining reasonable notice for public meetings of the Buckman Direct Diversion Board, etc. So, Ms. Long, will you take this one?
Yes, Madam Chair and members of the board. As you know, we annually, as you do with your own respective public bodies, for the counselors and commissioners, pass an Open Meetings Act resolution, which is required by state law that we do each year. We actually passed 2 last year so that we could take into account the meeting restrictions made necessary by the public health emergency and also considering safe meeting practices. So the resolution before you is the same resolution that you passed in May, but this just meets our annual requirement. So it is our Open Meetings Act resolution, but then with the provisions at the end of the resolution that allow for virtual participation so long as the public can hear or view the board meeting, and that we will take direction from the New Mexico Attorney General's office as they provide any for public meetings. So we recommend that you approve this resolution for this year.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Do I hear a motion to approve? Commissioner Hamilton?
I have a quick question just to make sure I'm not, we're retaining the ability in this to have virtual meetings, yes?
That is correct.
I just wanted to double check.
Yes, we kept that.
I would move
in there.
Yeah, because I think this is going to be necessary for months more, at least potentially. I'd move to approve.
Commissioner Hamilton? Hanson?
I second.
Okay. It's been moved and approved. It's been moved by Commissioner Hamilton, seconded by Commissioner Hanson. Karen, will you please call for a voice vote?
Yes, Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Mr. Helms,
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
and Chair Vihel Coppler.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item is item 10, matters from the board. Does the board have anything to say that matters? I hate to put it that way. Commissioner Hanson, I'm sure you have something that matters, but we can't hear you.
Yes, I want to say Happy New Year to everybody. And, yesterday, which was Epiphany, was, I think, a heart-wrenching day for all of us. And I think that we have to acknowledge that, that it was really unfortunate and sad to see what was happening in our capital in DC. It was also a happy day in Georgia. So I think that matters. I think it's important to acknowledge that we are facing really dangerous times in the next 2 weeks, and that we need to all be prepared.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Okay, I'll just say that I'm really looking forward to the future. I'm really looking forward to the future on what happened yesterday, and I'm looking forward to good resolutions of what things our country's going through, and looking forward to an EPA that is concerned about water, clean water, and the like for all of the items that we work on, which are really, really important. And so the next meeting date we have is February 4th at 4 p.m. And we're going to adjourn this meeting, but does anyone want to make a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Okay,
Madam Chair, I think we need to have Attorney Long explain what we're going in for to include that as part of the motion.
right. I was going to coach Jesse on if he has the agenda in front of him, if he could read off what we're going into executive session for. JC, do you have the agenda in front of you?
Nice. Somewhere I have it.
Okay, if you don't mind, then I'll ask Ms. Long to finish the motion for you.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair and Mr. Helms, the motion would be to adjourn and to go into executive session in accordance with the New Mexico Open Meetings Act, Section 1015(1)(h)(7) for discussion regarding pending litigation in which the BDD is a participant for the case as described on your agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to go into executive session. And Karen, will you please call for the voice vote?
Okay. Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Mr. Helms,
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes, I thought I had already unmuted.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
and Chair Vihel Coppler.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Before we leave, you can find your executive session invitation sent out by Jamie Ray Diaz in your email. All right, so if you can sign on as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.